It's savage when you play your own music and no one knows it's your own music. It's the most brutal measure of whether you've done something good or not. I played 2 at Lost Paradise. One of them got pretty much the best reaction out of everything I played in my set. And then the other one that I played got a very flat reaction. And you just think, well, I'll go back to the drawing board. Knowledge is one of the few things that you can give away without diminishing your own stock of it. You give away as much knowledge as you want, but you get all the enrichment from the satisfaction of sharing with people
like that
as
a lot,
well. You know, and introducing people to music. It's just a very beautiful thing.
Fish56 Octagon built a massive community by sharing the tunes he loves on Instagram and TikTok. He's got over 1 million followers and now he lives the dream as a globally touring DJ. We sit down with the man himself to pick his brain about his meteoric rise and his social media secrets to go viral in 2025.
What are your tips for somebody that maybe has like a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand followers and they're just trying to get noticed?
Okay, it's really important to understand.
Okay, so I have been looking to this episode of the Dojo podcast for a while now. We started talking a while ago and you were one of the first people that reached out to me after the second episode of the Dojo podcast with RJ Hamilton and telling me that you watched it and you thought it was great. And that's when I decided I had to have you on. So I am so happy today to present to all of you that don't know, which is not going to be many people, most of you will know, Fish56 Octagon on the Dojo podcast. Welcome, buddy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been greatly looking forward to it because it's the first podcast I've ever done as well.
All right.
And I just wanted to kind of bide my time and do one with the right person and that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, we're very honored that you chose us to do this. I'm sure there's plenty of people that want your time and attention right now. I want this to be like just a super organic conversation about all things music, a little bit of social media as well. But let us start with just going back to the beginnings. You just shared a couple of pictures of yourself before we started this conversation when you were raving out as a teenager. And I kind of want to delve into that a little bit more. How did this musical journey start for you? When were you first becoming aware of electronic music and when did it start becoming a passion for you?
So when I was younger, as you sort of head towards your teenage years and you start developing musical taste that breaks away from your parents, my parents were into sort of classical music and stuff like that. And, as you become a teenager, you start to turn your focus to stuff that's a bit more kind of, youth culture orientated. And my sister was always into kind of like goth music and metal and things like that. She was into sort of Sepultura and Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, older sister, 2.5 years older, Carter the Unstoppable, Sex Machine, Nirvana, a bit of grunge and stuff, which I listened to, but it never really I listened to it because it was like, a good alternative to listening to sort of classical music in the car with my dad, but it wasn't really my thing. It never really kind of gave me that fire. And then one time we were on a family holiday watching TV in the evening and there was an episode of Inspector Morse called Seraphim and Cherubim. May have said it slightly wrong. But it's as part of its plot, it featured the illegal rave scene at the time. It was probably around 93, 92. It was probably, what the rave scene would have resembled around like 1990, 91 sort of time. And they did some depictions of warehouse raves that actually were, watching it back now, like what looks to be reasonably accurate when I compare that to pictures of what those parties look like. But I remember seeing that at the time just thinking, wow, that looks like fun. So I was only young at the time. I was probably like, maybe 12 or something. Yeah. So as soon as I got back from that holiday, I sort of set about finding out as much about this as I could. And it was really easy actually because in those days, pirate radio was like a massive thing. So, we were living fairly close to London, so I could listen in like Pulse 90.6, Cool FM.
Yeah, awesome.
It was wicked. It was mainly hardcore that I was listening to, a little bit of house music, but mainly hardcore. And it's just as like hardcore was a big thing, and then happy hardcore developed, and then jungle and drum and bass when the hardcore scene sort of split like that. And I listened to all of that, absolutely loved all that. And I thought, I've got to get into this as quickly as I can. So I started buying records, and the first records that I bought were all kind of hardcore records. DJ Seduction, Come On. There was Sons of a Loop de Loop, Here Are Flowers in My Garden.
Which year was this then when you started buying vinyl?
I think this was about 93. Must have been just probably halfway through 1993. Rap and Aston Jeopardy was another one which I actually did a remix of with Heist last year for an album that DJ Rap's bringing out later this year. So that was pretty cool. But those are the earliest ones that I bought. And for decks, I just had to make do with what I could salvage at that time because and that was as follows. It was 2 record decks I'd got. So I had one on my hi-fi system anyway, separate, and then there was one in the attic that was my dad that was so old it played 78s as well as 33s and 45s.
Belt drives, I assume then.
Yeah, belt drives. It had a pitch control in it, plus or minus 4.
Right.
And the other one didn't have a pitch control.
Yeah.
So, and then for a mixer, I used my dad's old, there's like a mixer for camcorders that's just like, it's literally just an AV mixer with like 3 channel sliders on it. And that was all it had. And I used to just use the left input from one deck and the right input from the other deck, so I could use a channel slider. So I started off using the balance control on the amp, actually. That's how I did it. That's how I'd mix. I'd like Q1 up, and then I'd just use the balance control, and then I'd put the amp in mono, so the sound would come out both speakers, and I'd use the balance control to mix between deck 1 and deck 2. So that was like my crossfader. And then after that, I used this old camcorder mixer, which was okay, but it still didn't have a Q feature on it, but it at least gave me sliders.
Yeah.
And then finally for my birthday, and I think it was my 14th birthday, my parents got me decks, which were SoundLab DLP1s.
Right.
SoundLab DLP1s, and I had a Gemini mixer, and I should have looked up the model number of it. I can't remember which one it was, but it had circular like kill buttons on it, but all that did was like just kill the channel, so you could use it like just to like
transform and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very primitive, right?
Yeah.
But it did the job. And the thing is with learning to beat match on belt drive turntables is it's very light touch.
Yeah.
You know, like any type of clumsiness will knock your mix far out. So it's quite a good way to learn. And then with a mixer which didn't have separate EQ for the channel, again, it's quite a good way to learn to beat match, because if your mix is even slightly out, you hear the kicks colliding straight away. Whereas today, when you can, not today, like for the last, whatever, 25 years, when you can just you can cut the bass out as you're mixing something in, it's a lot more forgiving.
Yeah.
So it was difficult, but it's a good way to learn to do something difficult like that.
Well, you know what, like just to interject here, I actually believe that learning on crap gear makes you a better DJ in the long run, because like if you can figure shit out on like, budget stuff, once you then progress onto pro gear, it's like a completely, like a revelation almost, it's like, oh my God, this is so easy. You know what I mean? Like I actually have some control here. So amazing. And also the ingenuity of kids. I mean, like I remember like also like, in the 80s, just doing recording off the radio, cassette tapes, and then trying to do transitions by perfectly like hitting the pause button and then trying to link it up so when the next tune starts on the beat, hitting record on the beat. And it's just the ingenuity of kids that want to learn the stuff. So okay, amazing. And then like you got your own proper set of decks. Did vinyl collection then already become like an obsession? Because it clearly is for you.
It was all I spent my money on when I was that age. It was literally all I spent my money on. And actually, like I don't think I've ever told this story before, but like one time, I used to go to Tower Records, which is actually pretty good. They had a very good range. It's a Piccadilly Circus, right, of the slightly more mainstream stuff. But I used to go to Bluebird Records, where in Bromley in South East London, which was near where I lived. And I remember one time my mum had given me the money to buy like a new coat, and I'd gone into Bromley and I'd spent it all on records, and I'd had to tell her that I'd been mugged for the money because I'd spent it all on records, give my mate the records to then get back from him in like the later day in school or whatever, right? No, I was totally obsessed, and that was really kind of like that happy hardcore sort of like hardcore and early drum and bass phase of things, buying records like Ray Keith, Terrorist, things like that, right? When they were first coming out on Moving Shadow. And then when I was 16, I got Technics 1210s. I wasn't doing so well at school because I was just so obsessed with like music, and I was actually doing a bit of music production as well on my Commodore Amiga with Octamed, which is like, very fiddly, but again, it kind of teaches you some good principles, but it's like a tracker and basic sampling, and it was Pete Cannon still uses it today,
Tracker software where you like sequence vertically, right? It just runs through. Like, I've seen videos of that. It's absolutely mad what people used to accomplish with that software, where you have like, I mean, like, it's so abstract to just imagine some sort of musical arrangement coming out of that. This must have been then early teens at that stage, right? Or late teens at that stage.
I just done my GCSEs when I got my Technics,
right?
Because my mum and dad ended up offering me a cash incentive if I did
16,
better at
17
school.
then, basically.
That's right. And they said they were like, it will give you like £50 for every B you get and £70 for every A you get, and £100 bonus if you get an A in French, because that's my worst subject. And I totally pulled out of the hat because I got expelled from school about it was only about 6 months before my
Right.
GCSEs, right? And then I'd gone to this new college in London. But the problem with the college in London was it was in Notting Hill, where the Music Exchange shop is. So I used to go in there like almost every day after school for like an hour and go downstairs into their basement.
I love that.
And they had where every record was £1.
Yeah.
And all the DJs would go in there and just dump their old records. So like if you were an upfront DJ at the time, all the promos that you got that you weren't listening to, they'd just take them in there, dump them all out, and they'd get
Okay,
credits.
this is serious stuff actually, because you actually turned into a digger in your teens, basically.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, I mean, I started buying records in my 20s when I started DJing, and I was at university then. And for us, it was just like already juno.co.uk, going online. Still went to record shops a lot, but a lot of sort of online buying. So you started properly digging in the bargain bins already then at that time.
Well, there was this shop. It's a chain actually. I don't know if they still have a lot of them or not. There was one in Camden. There's one in Shepherd's Bush in Goldhawk Road, where the basement in there, every record was 20p.
Yeah.
A lot of white labels, and you just go in there. It wouldn't really matter. Go in there with 20 quid. Come out with 100 records, and I mean, there'd be some of it was crap. One of them I've got at home is something that was unexpectedly really valuable. It was a really cool record, like 20p, and then everything in between. And some of it's something where you know the label, you know the artist. Or you take a punt on it, or you just buy a load of white labels just for fun. And some of it, like I've got Hard Drive Deep Inside as a white label and Tough Jam Experience, both for 20p. Yeah. Right. I only found out what they were like by looking at the etching years later and putting it into Google, or or you find out what a tune is and you realise it's something that you bought for a bar. So it was good fun. But that was all I spent my money on in those days.
Okay, I mean that explains a lot. At that stage, obviously, you're already collecting vinyl. You're already collecting music with a voracious appetite for wanting to discover this kind of music. When was the first clubbing experience, and when did that translate into actually like participating in rave culture? So kind of the teenager's hobby that he's doing at home to out and about in the scene.
So I think we first went out in 1995 to Club UK. Yeah. And we used to go, the main places that we went in those days was Club UK, Ministry of Sound, Leisure Lounge, and there's a place called EC1 that's closed now. But yeah, it was
they used to have LTJ Bookham there, right? Or no, what was the drum and bass night that they had there?
Oh, I'm not sure. It wasn't a drum and bass night that we went to. No,
maybe I'm mistaking this for something else, because the name rings a bell. Like,
Leisure Lounge, LTJ Bookham's night was Logical Progression, right? And I'm just trying to think. I think that was like
I'm mixing things up. Yeah, I think
that was like a Thursday at the Ministry of Sound or something. But I wasn't so into going out to drum and bass events at that stage in my journey. I was more like, it was more house music. That was the mid-90s when house was really blowing up. And like we weren't going out like week in, week out, because we were like, we were quite young. We used to do that thing where I'd like tell my parents I'd stay at my friend's house, and then my friend would do the same thing, right? And then we'd like go into London and go on these nights out with like £25 in your pocket, and you'd have like amazing nights, like absolutely amazing nights. Club UK was sick, and we've seen some really good DJs in there, like Danny Rampling, Carl Cox. They had a room at the back called the Pop Art Room, and that was more kind of like on a techno type thing. The Final Frontier was there on a Friday night, so that was a really really good good club. Went to there, and then we started going as we, just through that whole phase as we grew older as teenagers. Me and my friends would start going to Bagley's and stuff. I was DJing only a tiny little bit at a few parties here and there, like parties around people's houses and stuff. I'd never really applied myself and put the effort in and the push into being a DJ. Is the truth. Although it was something I love doing in my bedroom and love doing as a hobby and at these sort of sporadic parties here and there. But it was also, as it is now, very hard to break into. I used to make tapes and like send tapes out and try and give tapes to promoters at events and stuff. But with the best will in the world, you wouldn't bet your car now that any of those tapes were ever listened to. Yeah. It's just another tape in your hand and stuff. I think business networking, which is something we'll probably touch on, because I know you said you've got a focus of trying to help young people, getting into
Absolutely.
it. But, networking is super super important in any industry as it was then, and that was a key area where I probably fell down and didn't do enough.
Yeah. So. At the time, DJ competitions were a big thing as well. Do you remember Bedroom Bedlam?
Yeah, I remember that. That's how James Sabila broke through.
And Youssef as well. James Sabila broke through. I remember him winning that one. Youssef also broke through with that. And that's how I actually got my first break. Not Bedroom Bedlam, but I won IDJ Raw Talent. Oh, okay. And that was in 2005. And Nick Fanciulli was one of the judges. And I like literally same as you. You know, like I had like a bunch of CDs pressed up, you know, with my phone number on it, and like and just my details on it, and I just passed out loads of them. And eventually, I got a call from the guy who gave me a call was Enzo Siragusa, and we had mutual friends. So there was like a little bit of a sort of common group of friends that we shared. But he then invited me down to become a resident at this party, and this is literally just like handing out like CDs. So yeah, the networking is super important. Being part of the scene is super important. But did you ever think about like this is like something that I could do for a living or a career path, or did this never even cross your mind?
I think it was, you know, the reality is I just didn't try hard enough back then. I had other things going on. I sort of got quite into music production from about the age of 18 onwards.
Right.
Before that, I was doing stuff on Octamed, but it was more, you know, just kind of like messing around and stuff.
Yeah.
But everything I produced from when I was 18 onwards, I got a PC running Cakewalk, just the MIDI sequence. So it was just before like digital audio workstations was a thing, or it was coming in, but it was just very early in that stage. And I had some quite, you know, I had a few MIDI synths. I had an Oasis QS8, which I got cheap actually from that place in Charing Cross Road. You know, it's still going actually, that place. It was like a full 88 key keyboard, but I had a synth, like, so I guess what was it, a sample and synth, like built in.
Yeah.
I got a Yamaha AM1X, which was like a simple virtual analog modeling synth. And then from there, I started getting quite interested in buying synthesizers and stuff, and I built up quite a collection over time, most of which I then later sold. Another terrible mistake. But I was quite into doing that, and all of that music from that era onwards I've actually still got. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not great, right? Because I'm only just getting to the point now where I'm making stuff that I'm happy actually releasing, but I've got it all, and at some point in the future I will like release some of it, put it up on SoundCloud for people to listen to, so you can hear the whole journey. Because you can hear it go from very, very like very super basic, gradually getting better over time as I get better synths and learn better techniques. And then I moved to using like Acid, which was like a bit of a hybrid, because you're not using VSTs in it, you're still recording the output from a MIDI synths, and then you've got these like loops that you've made yourself. So, you know, you come up with your riff or whatever, record it, and you get it into Acid. But then from there, you've got all of the effects and plugins and stuff that you can use, and you can reorder stuff, and you can, you know, flip stuff, and you can repitch it and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the hybrid. And then obviously the jump to Ableton was like, you know, like light years ahead. And that's
and it's like back then producing music wasn't easy, right? Like if you got into producing in the early 2000s or even late 90s, it was mostly full on hardware setups with, you know, like a DAW as the sort of centerpiece of it, but you would send MIDI out to a bunch of machines. You would have to have outboard gear. I had some friends that got into production early on, and it was complicated, and people were always trying to wonder, like, how did people make those records that we love? And there weren't many resources out there. Like there wasn't YouTube out there. There weren't sort of online education schools like we have with Dojo now, where you can just kind of learn from the best. And figuring that stuff out by yourself is just super tough. But then also experimentation leads to like happy accidents and I guess sort of cool pieces of music. And yeah, but I'd love to hear some of that stuff, that early stuff that you made. I mean, you shared recently one of, I think it's your first production that's coming now, your first official release?
So my first thing that came out was a remix that I did for Paul Oakenfold, but it was a remix of an existing track, right? Yeah. And that was on Armada, and that's, that was a good effort. I did the arrangement, I did the production on it. I only had very limited amount of the original stems, didn't really have like most of it. Some of it I ripped from the original, some of it I recreated. And I got that as good as I could get that. And then it went to David Forbes from Mixdown and Master, and he did a little bit of additional engineering on it as well. Yeah. Like added the wealth of his whatever 30 years of experience of music production. And came up with something that was really true to the original, that didn't try and take it off and make it really like, you know, a totally modern thing, but just took away some of the slightly more dated elements, gave it that loud mastering that you now get, so it can stand up in club play, whereas the original would just be way too quiet. And that was the first thing I did, but it was a remix. So the first original production, which is something I've done totally from scratch, is like that, which is out.
That's the one you shared with me also. Then afterwards,
that's right.
The first fully self-produced.
That's right. Yeah, that's
well,
right.
Look, I listened to it, and I think you've got a good future ahead of you, and I think you're going to keep developing as an artist. And what an incredible journey! But was it like? Let me just go back a little bit again for you when you started producing, because I want to kind of find out, was producing like a constant, like all the way through, or did you kind of take a break and now that things are starting to tick over with a DJ career, is it something that you then sort of picked up again?
No, very much the second one. If I've been doing it consistently all the way through now, it would be, I'd expect to have had a lot more material released. But so what happened was I got really into it, and I was really into the hardware, and I had loads of synths. I had a whole rack full of modules as well, like Korg Wave Station. I had I had that Alpha Juno, but the rack one, the MKS70. I had a Roland D50.
The controller, the MK70 controller for it, right?
That's the MKS70. Yeah, That's actually
that's a lovely synth, and they had that classic Hoover sound in there.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it's most known for is the Hoover sound.
Yeah.
I had a Korg Prophecy, which is the one like that, that's got like a ribbon controller on it on the side that also like a pitch bend wheel or a mod wheel, and it had 5 LFOs on it, and it was that was a cool one. That was a virtual analog one. I had a Novation Nova. I had the Novation Drum Station, if you remember that little.
I remember this Novation Drum Station. That was a UK classic that like everybody used to use.
I've got Novation Peak now, actually. I think they make really nice gear. But I had all of that stuff, and towards the end of my production, I got to the point where, for the time, it was acceptable, right? Yeah. And there's one track that I wrote then, which I did have played out in my sets now. I had it remastered, right? Which was a remake of it samples of Prodigy, No Good Start the Dance, right? But makes it into a sort of hard house type track with Hoovers in it and stuff. And I've played that a few times, like when I've been playing out. I've kind of moved away from that sort of thing now. It was more the novelty of playing my stuff. But I got to the point where my music was like, it was like slightly better than mediocre, I'd say, being truthful, right? I spent so much time on it at university, because at university it was like, my whole bedroom was just like a music studio.
Right.
And I spent so much time on it.
But uni, you didn't do anything music related, what you studied, right?
No, I studied politics and sociology, right? And I did a music module. I did 2 music modules for my free choice, which was like on the electroacoustic composition side of things. So it wasn't really dance music orientated, but learned more about musical theory and learned how to use Pro Tools on the Mac, because that was the platform then. And what was that granular synth called? Oh, what was it called? It'll come back to me. But yeah, there was, it was a bit of an eye opener, just using different technology and learning a bit about like room treatment and, like those kinds of things that just were totally unknown to me at the time, because I was just, writing stuff at home using hi-fi speakers and stuff that I cobbled together. Around 2005, this is like a real crossroads moment for me. My career, after I left university, kind of started getting a bit more serious and more time consuming. Right. We were working at the time I was working for Comet, the electrical retailer, doing a junior marketing job there. And it was just time consuming. I was leaving the house at 6 in the morning, 5:30, getting back sometimes at like 6, 7, 8 p.m. And how time consuming music production is.
Totally.
And we were well into the clubbing at the time, right? That was when I was at my absolute peak, going out Friday night, sometimes going out Saturday night. And to be able to make the time to sit and do music production, just that it just gradually ramped down. Yeah. The last few things I wrote were all in Ableton. I'd moved away from using the hardware. I'd digitised my whole record collection, and I moved house, and the record collection about a year later was still all sitting in boxes. And I just thought, this is just kind of taking up space and I'm not using it anymore. So I sold quite a lot of the record collection off, which was a horrible mistake, but it turned out not to be down the line. And I just got quite focused on my career. And in my spare time, we were going clubbing, going to Ibiza every year. And, the music production just kind of, it just took a...
Well, that happens a lot. And I see that a lot, basically, where people kind of have to make the choice between, pursuing a normal career and then going down the music route. And it's almost like people who are trying to make it while they have a normal career, it's like they're working 2 jobs. It's so hardcore having to do both at the same time, putting in the hours, producing, while holding down a full-time job. Myself, like when I finished with university, I deliberately didn't pick any work that required me to be there full time. I always sort of kind of got through with part-time jobs and then did a little bit of DJing on the side, because I wanted that time to dedicate to music production. But yeah, like people frequently sort of, have to make that decision. I always say to like young students and people that try to make it, it's like, if you can reduce your financial pressures by as much as you can, like don't buy that new car, like stay living at home with your parents for another 2 or 3 years. That will just give you that kickstart to be able to put in the hours to make music before life gets too serious, because as you just said, at some point, like you just have to make a choice. Like, well, I've got to make a living. And in your case, a family to support as well, right? So
yeah, because I walked away from my work in August last year, and that was a massive decision because I'm main breadwinner in my household. I had a good solid career that with 20 years of just working in good companies and just performing well, earning decent money. So walking away from that was a really difficult thing. And actually, I was doing exactly what you just described there, because when unexpectedly, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about this in a minute, but unexpectedly when this DJing trajectory kind of just took off for me. I did have 6 months of working, just doing the two things, right?
Yeah.
And it was very, very difficult indeed.
yeah, all of a sudden your weekends are full, traveling, touring, right?
Yeah.
Plus you're working 5 days a week during the week, and then you've got to do your social media on top of that. That's 3 jobs basically.
Yeah. Social media is it's not exactly a full-time job, but it's very time-consuming if you do it right. But once you get to a certain critical mass, it can become less time-consuming, right? But at the early stages, it has to be a focus whether you like it or not. Otherwise, it's just very hard to get cut through. But yeah, I was doing what you just described there. I was going out, like, playing Friday, playing Saturday, and it wasn't just difficult from the point of view of being tired in work on Monday, but it was also difficult just focusing on the two completely different things.
Yeah.
It was hard doing, something I was perfectly happy and it was enjoyable with my job before started to look a little bit mundane compared to what I was doing on the weekends. And therefore, I didn't really want to be in a position where my co-workers started sort of going, oh yeah, he's taking his foot off the gas now.
The contrast must have been mad, basically, where you have this other life taken off, and then you find yourself in the office on Monday morning, just like, whenever I think about offices, because I used to work in a big office as well, I was in medical market research, and you just hear like the sort of muted noise of copying machines, and like, it's the soundscape of The Office, like The Office, the Ricky Gervais TV series, where you just hear like that kind of soundtrack where like you're in the office. It must have been mad, like the contrast going like, what the hell is happening to my life at the weekends, and then being in that, as you said, environment that must have seemed so mundane. Like, how did you?
I've always been quite lucky with my work, because like when you work in marketing, you get to do some of the more fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's obviously a lot of the time you're doing stuff that's like so quite normal, a bit.
I was painting a bleak picture. Maybe your job wasn't that boring.
No, it was. And I did get to do some stuff that was reasonably fun. We did do a fair bit of jollies, and there was some staff and corporate hospitality, and doing like fun activities. And you could kind of pick and choose, because I was like kind of heading up marketing for an organisation, so we'd get to do some stuff that was actually fun, and I really did think that I'd miss that side of it, but actually I don't, because what I'm doing now is just on another scale completely. It's like I wouldn't.
In terms of satisfaction and fulfillment, I can imagine. I want to get into all of that like in detail later, but I kind of want to go sequentially in terms of like what brings us to this place where you're now. What got you started on social media? How did you have this idea of sharing your music? I know you had a car channel first.
Yeah, that's right.
I've never seen your car content, but like, take me back to where you started with social media, and what was the sort of motivation for you to even putting yourself out there and sharing content?
Yeah, without wanting to go right back, but around 2005, when my serious career started taking shape, and I got to the point where my records had been sitting in a box for a while, and I didn't sell all of them off, but I sold off quite a lot of them, right? Because I just thought they're just not doing anything. They're just taking up space, right? Kept quite a few of my favourites back, about 200 back, but I probably did sell off like quite a few hundred more than that I'd accumulated over that time. And then you fast forward to 2020, to the end of the year, when I'm out with my friends at Christmas, and it was when we had all of those funny restrictions in place for COVID, and we were sitting in a rooftop bar place just opposite Waterloo Station, and my friend was telling me about TikTok. And I'd heard of it, but I wasn't interested in social media at all, right? I didn't use it for anything. And I had a look at it, and we'd been obviously drinking, because it was our men's Christmas party event. And to get onto TikTok, you have to set up a user account. So I just put in the first stupid thing that came into my mind, which was Fish 56 Octagon, right?
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, honestly,
pretty random.
Well, that is all there is to it. I mean, some people have like queried whether it correlates to my height, which is 5'6". Yeah. So sometimes I say that, but I had a look at TikTok, and the way it works is the first few videos, it shows you the most popular ones of that day. And then it analyses how long you look at things for, whether you interact, engage with posts. So, I had quite a few where it was like, kind of like girls dancing and all that kind of stuff. And it's a bit, I'm not really that bothered about that, my age, But then after a while, there was some where it was like, there was like a plumber showing you how to do a really good line of silicone, like down the side of a bath and stuff. And I'd watch those for a bit longer because I do that sort of stuff myself at home.
Yeah.
And you think I could learn something. And then after a while, the algorithm overbakes it and starts showing you loads of like tips for people putting taps in and stuff. And you go, oh, this is too much now. And in the end, it finds its balance. But TikTok was in its sort of infancy in 2020. And I remember watching it for, some of the lockdown in 2021. And I was thinking like, I'm sure I could do better than some of this content, not to denigrate the whole platform, to sound arrogant or whatever, but there's a lot of stuff on there that I thought, I could make something more interesting than this. This is someone that is having an argument with someone else about a parking space, right? Surely I can be more interesting than this, right? And I thought, what should I make my content about? And the first thing that came to my mind was music, and I just dismissed it purely because I just didn't think anyone would be interested.
Right.
Because I thought there's too many young people on the app. And I'm like, I was still going to Ibiza and going to Glastonbury and all that stuff, but I just couldn't see that I would be someone that would cut through versus all of these like producers and DJs and people that were in the music scene and people that were young. And I just thought you're just wasting your time trying to do that, right? So I kind of wrote it off. Started making some, and then I thought I'll do it about cars, but then I thought I've only got 3 cars. Sorry, no, only 3 cars. Like we had 3 cars at the time, and I thought, like, once I've done all 3 of those, that's it really, right? But I had a collection of watches which were very mediocre. There was nothing flash there at all. And I had about 15 of those. I collected them in the lockdown the year before because we weren't going on holiday. And they were watches that were between 30 and £100 each, right? So they weren't anything flash. And I started making some videos about that. And you can still see all this on TikTok. It's not on Insta because it wasn't on Insta. And I was so and this is such a key learning for like any young people that are looking to get into social media, or old people, anyone that's afraid that is intimidated by being on camera or is worried about getting judged. Because you can go back, if you type my name in on TikTok, Fish56 Octagon watch, right? And you can see those videos. And I was so unconfident and didn't really know what I was doing. And even technically when I put like the words up on the screen, it was all just a total mess because I didn't know how to use the app properly and stuff. But I started, and you get a lot of negativity from people telling you you're crap straight away. But I knew that was coming, right? And I was like, well, I'm gonna have to persevere with it for a bit, right? And then I don't know what. I remember exactly what it was actually. By April of 2021, we were on a family holiday, and for some reason, I made a video about the Max Power magazine because someone mentioned Max Power. Were you ever involved in that? That magazine where people were making those ludicrous modified cars in the 90s, and it was a big scene, really popular, nice scene, friendly, and everyone had a unique like build, and obviously a lot of it was ghastly and didn't drive very well as cars, but it was a scene that people were very passionate about. And someone asked me a question about that, and I made a response video, and it just lit up,
took off.
So I did a few more on that, and then I thought, well, I wanted to do about cars to start. Well, I wanted to do about music in the first place, but I didn't think anyone would want to listen. So I wanted to do my social media about cars anyway. So I sort of focused on that for a little bit, and this is such a key learning for anyone on their social media journey. Sometimes you trial and error, persistence, and you stumble across something by chance that spikes like that, and you think, okay, well, the natural reaction is, right, I'm going to do this to death. But if the marketing mindset is like, what was it about it? Is it the subject? Was there something? Is it how I presented it? Is it how I talked about it? Am I talking to a new audience? You have to isolate what it is that's kind of sparked that interest, and then you can look to repeat that, and then you can also look to split test further content. So I did a few on Max Power. And they all did really well. What was it that killed the Max Power scene? Was it the cost of insurance? Was it because car manufacturers started bringing out, like AMG and M Sport body kits, so you didn't need to modify your cars anymore? Was it legislation? Was it changes in whatever, right? And it sparked debate and sparked interest. And I noticed that, where you have a comment section where people are discussing stuff more, those videos get more reach because it's engagement, which is, it's kind of basic, right? But it was something that I learned at the time.
Sorry to interject here, but I found it super, super interesting because straight away I'm realizing that your approach wasn't just like, oh, things just happened. Like, you took probably some of your marketing mindset from your work, you analyzed, you split tested, you put some serious thought into why certain videos performed well and why certain videos didn't perform well. And I think like your success is a testament to like that having like an analytical mindset and having like a methodical approach is key, basically, and then from those car videos, take me to the place where you shared your first like your first music video?
So this is quite key actually, right? With what you just said there. So I've worked in marketing for 20 years and never did anything to do with social media, right? Not like one campaign in social. I wasn't in the social media department. It wasn't what I was doing at all. But the analytical approach to stuff where you look at right, we've got this result.
Yeah.
What drove that result? Or we've got this problem. What's our approach? It doesn't matter whether the approach works or not, but you have to understand what the approach is and why you think it's going to work. So that then when you get to the result stage, you can say what drove that result. So one thing that I noticed, so obviously the switch to making car content about cars that people had some sort of emotional connection with worked better and was more engaging than the watch content. So with that in mind, I thought, right, well, I wanted to do cars more than watches anyway. So that's not that's not a difficult decision. One thing that I did with the Max Power videos was that I put some music in the background. You can add a sound on TikTok and Instagram. Usually, or often people use it more frequently when they've put a video on that hasn't got any sound. So if it's like someone skateboarding, you can pick from all the sounds and put the sound in the background. But you can also put the sound in and just put it very quietly and then just have the original video audio over the top, which is what I did. And I did that because I firstly was thinking with Max Power, it's about reminiscing, right? And music's a way of reminding people of those times. It's not just about showing pictures of what cars look like and stuff. You could go back and play music from the era as well and just make it a little bit more kind of interesting and engaging, right? And I did that, and a few people commented on the music, and I thought, okay, well, that's cool. So
you picked electronic music, I assume?
Oh, only, and it was only really like drum and bass and stuff as well. Because I thought we've got a young audience here. There's quite a lot of drum and bass.
Somebody picked up on the tunes, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of people picked up on it, and I thought, well, I'll just keep doing it because I like it, and it makes my videos a bit different. It's more interesting than a 40-year-old guy talking about a car, and then you've got a nice tune in the background. Why, what's the downside? I might as well keep doing that. But I also had some people like going like, why have you picked that track? Or I can't believe you've played like Valley of the Shadows or John Mayer.
So they had the proper heads, basically. Some of the music geeks were picking up on some of the more obscure stuff. Let's just say.
I mean, like some of them are big tunes, some of them are obscure tunes, but it always sparked a bit of a conversation. And then people, that didn't go unnoticed with me because I was thinking, well, people are obviously interested in that, and people are saying, why have you put like Valley of the Shadows on there? And I'd answer, and I'd go, well, I was quite into this music when I was younger, and I still listen to a bit of it now, and I still go out to festivals, I go to Ibiza and stuff. I'm quite into my dance music, and every now and again people go, show us your record collection and stuff, and I just used to think I didn't want to diversify too much away from my channel because I thought I've got all these car people and it might switch them off, right? But every now and again I would I'd do some videos where I'd go, right, here's one of my favourite records or something. And then one thing that happened in the lockdown was, as I referenced before, and I think a lot of people were in this situation, like I didn't get furloughed and without holidays to spend money on and without going out, I had a bit more spare cash. So I started rebuying some of those records that I'd very foolishly sold in 2005. And every time a collection, from usually from Discogs, like sometimes Juno or, Hard to Find Records or whatever, like whenever they'd come in the post, sometimes I'd open it and make a TikTok and go, right, what have we got today? And you can see all of this on TikTok. It was just before I was doing Instagram. But I'd open it up and then I'd play through these records. And a lot of them were like, classic tunes that big in a lot of different scenes, because I've always been into a lot of different types of dance music. And the thing I noticed with these videos was that they really spiked, the views really spiked. So it was another moment, just like when I did Max Power, just like when I realised that adding music in the background. So it wasn't contrived. It wasn't something I set out to do and I thought, I was like, grasping for ideas. It's part of it is trial and error with social media. Everyone will have their own audience. The algorithm will show stuff to different cohorts of people. And at some point, if you persist with it, you'll find your audience. Now, obviously, you can bias that. If you're doing stuff about gardening, you're not going to get a load of 18-year-old ravers, right? So you've got to kind of keep it within the lane that you're comfortable operating in. But similarly, that trial and error thing.
What was the frequency that we were putting out videos at that time?
So with the car videos, I was probably doing like, I don't know, maybe I was doing quite a few, like probably 3 or 4 a day and stuff. Because
this is super interesting to me because I feel that you only start noticing the patterns when you're very consistent and when you're really doing it daily. Because on Dojo, like we're putting out content daily, and as a DJ, I never put out content daily. It's just not enough to put out, Well, there probably is, but like for me, it was like, okay, I'm just posting videos from gigs when I made music, some lifestyle stuff, but like it was always a chore, and like me, maybe like once or twice a week. if I'm on it, basically. But I think you only start noticing the patterns when you're very consistent and very regular with it, because we're starting to notice these patterns with the Dojo channel now. And it's like, oh, certain ones just go through the roof. And then you do that thing again and it happens again. It's like, it's reproducible. Like there's something that I've noticed here is working, basically. So yeah, that's super interesting to me. That's two, 3 times a day.
I completely agree with that, and I'd recommend anyone that's looking to get into this to be. You don't have to post several things a day, but you have to be consistent with how you do it, so that you build a follower base, and so that the algorithm knows what you're. Kind of what you're about as well, right? I think it's important. That consistency is important. But I just noticed with the music ones that it was spiking. And the thing is, I only really set out at the start to do the social media for fun, right?
Right.
In the end, it was producing kind of a nice little side hustle, side income, not mega amount of money, but enough, to make it kind of worthwhile.
How did you monetize that then, like the little side hustle? What were the income streams then?
So with the car thing, TikTok pays you on views, right? And it's, that's it's as simple as that. So you do a good video, you'll get, they used to be called the Creator Fund. Now it's called something, I can't remember what it's called now, but it's so you just get paid for views. So every month, I'd work. It was a lot of work. I was probably putting 5, 6, 7 hours a day into it on top of my job. But it was that, and also I had an ebook which was like a car buying guide, which was. Once I had it set up, it was sort of almost kind of like passive income. I only had to mention it and every now and again on a video. And it was a 30-page book that I wrote with loads of information about how to buy cars, how to get good deals, what the different types of ways of buying cars are, what the risks are, how to make sure you stay safe financially, how to get your car inspected, what to look for if you're looking for it yourself. So it was like, and then there was loads of tips. There was 2 pages on how to get your insurance quotes down. So honestly, anyone buying this book would have saved, it was a tenner, would have saved that easily, right? So that wasn't a particularly tough sell. And by the end of the car thing, the TikTok, it was turning over an okay amount of money. I don't really want to
How many followers are we talking about then at this time?
So at that point, I probably had about maybe 150,000 just on TikTok.
Okay, but that's substantial already.
Yeah, but it's easier on TikTok than on Instagram. Instagram, that's like a big following, right? That's probably more like, 15,000 on Insta, right? TikTok followers are
15,000 Insta at the time, about 150,000 on TikTok.
It was it was like 150 on TikTok, and I wasn't doing Insta, right? So TikTok was paying per views. I had a bit of income from selling this ebook on how to buy cars, and I had the occasional brand deal, which were relatively small beer, but they were nice things to do. I was doing something with Cover, which is a temporary insurance company, and I was doing something with Pioneer because that's another thing. I'm quite into fitting car stereos to cars, so I had a brand deal with Pioneer where they'd send me this stuff and I'd install it in cars and install it in friends' cars and do little tutorials.
So it was
on how
a
to do it
proper
and
thing.
stuff.
It's mad that I don't even know about this because it was probably because I don't know your TikTok. I only know your Insta.
Yeah.
But it was a proper thing. A big channel, and you had some sponsorships and that. And then you said you're noticing the music videos taking off. When was the decision made to lean fully into music and go that is now my thing?
So that was December 2023. So what had happened was I'd done the car thing for probably, I don't know, maybe 2.5, 3 years sort of thing, right? And like I said, it was producing a nice little income on the side, but that wasn't the reason I'd done it. I'd always had a good job. It was very time consuming for what it paid. It was well below minimum wage level, put it that way, right, for the hours I was putting in. And I hadn't really got into it for that reason anyway. And also I always thought, if I could scale it up enough, then it could become interesting. There's look at motor journalism and stuff like that. But it was, the problem with it is that it would have involved going along to all the trade shows and networking within the business environment, which is what I was doing day to day, my day job anyway. And it just wasn't that appealing, right? Although I'm a petrol head. I love my cars. I've always been into my cars. But I noticed that the music stuff was getting good views every time I posted. And sometimes I'd post from a festival or, and the views on those videos would be crazy high, right? Because I think it's just something about relatability with the younger audience. And after doing a few years of that, I just thought, I'm just going to switch to doing music now because obviously people are interested in it. It's a bigger passion of mine than cars anyway, but I just didn't do it to start with for the reason that I explained, because I just didn't think anyone would be interested. And now I've proved, inadvertently, I've proven that actually people are interested in it, so I feel confident doing it. And really, I thought the perks of doing this, although I'll lose this sort of side hustle income because I couldn't see how I was going to monetize music. I just thought there's no revenue stream in that. But I didn't really care. What I wanted to do was to get to go along to a few events and go backstage and meet a few DJs and meet a few music producers. Hopefully some of these people that were like my legends when I was younger, when I was growing up, and people that are current now. That's all I really wanted. I thought maybe I'll get to go to a festival for free or something, and get to go, do some that sort of stuff, interview people backstage. That was all I really wanted to do. But at that time, interestingly, and this is another happy coincidence, my boss took me to one side and he just said, "Look, we're aware that you're doing this social media," because when I switched to doing the music thing full time, I also started doing Instagram, and that started growing very rapidly, rapidly. Because I didn't realise how important Instagram was to the music industry. I'd only ever really known TikTok, right? But actually, the majority of DJs, producers, record labels are, TikTok's a very small thing for them. Although some of the audience are on there.
It's strange because for popular music and for pop music, like TikTok is it, basically. You have some of the biggest stars in the world that have blown up for TikTok, But then also there's certain people that have broken through social media, like Mochek, for example, also broke through to TikTok first. But yeah, generally where you see like, you look at both of the followings of both accounts, and like Instagram will be like a 10x over what TikTok is for like DJs. I don't know why that is for electronic music, but it seems to be a thing where Instagram is more important for electronic dance music.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason I started doing Instagram was because I'd always neglected it up to that point, just because I thought I'd be better off being like a bigger fish in a smaller pond on TikTok than trying to compete. Because on Instagram, in the car world, you've got people that are just doing it full time, they're out with pro equipment and kit and stuff like that, doing really flashy, really high end, really good looking, well crisp produced videos, and my TikTok was always just me at home, like with an Auto Trader screen in the background talking about cars and stuff, and that seemed to work for the audience. But TikTok was a bit more DIY, a bit more rough and ready. So I thought I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. But with Instagram, what I noticed was once I started doing music, there were a few accounts that started like ripping my TikTok content and reposting it. Yeah, right. which I didn't mind. Well, I had a word with one guy, and he just started tagging me, and I thought, I don't really care. What do I care? It's just only put my name out there. But then I thought, well, if other people are going to do it, I might as well just post it myself, right, and grow my account. It's obviously because that proved that there was demand there as well, without me having to do anything. So I started posting on Insta, and that's when it took off, because a lot of people at work are on Insta but not on TikTok, because my work environment was like people that are a bit, not the young ravers. And my boss took me to one side, good guy, and he just said, look, aware that you're doing this, it's not a problem. I don't think he went as far as to say like I enjoy watching your content, but he just said, look, just be careful, right? That you're not seen to be posting during the hours of work, because that's something that will be perceived as a problem in the company. And I was like, well, that's fair enough. And it kind of shook me up a bit when he had this conversation with me, because I tried to keep it under the radar up to that point, but it was getting harder because people were asking to get selfies with me in meetings and stuff when we were going to see customers and things, which was a little bit. It was fun and funny, but also not that professional as well. So. But the next morning I woke up and I just thought, right, how am I going to deal with this then? I need to post my content just in a way that makes it obvious that it's not the middle of the day or anything. And so I got up a bit earlier than normal, and I got out of bed and I started trying to find some clothes, but my wife was asleep in bed and she just kept going like, shh. So I went into the toilet, and then on the back of the door I saw this dressing gown that my mum had given my wife a year earlier, this red dressing gown. And my mum had given it to my wife because it was too big, thick and heavy, and my mum didn't find it comfortable to wear. And my wife didn't really want it either, to be honest, for the same reason. And I thought it just looks ridiculous, right? But I put it on just because it was cold. And then I thought, right, I'm going to have to make my social media videos now. And I thought, I'm just wearing this now, and I am warm and comfortable. So I'm just going to go down and like make my videos. And I've always been a little bit quirky, and just to see what happens. And it just turned into a massive engagement driver, right? Like loads of people going like, obviously you get like, people being quite negative, but you also get a lot of positivity as well, going like, where did you get your robe from, and and all this, right?
It's funny how these things turn into like a thing. I used to do these videos called the spinning chair videos, where like I'm just sitting like, whenever I finished a tune, I would sit in my spinning chair and I'd feel myself spinning around, because I wanted to show my studio, like, spinning around my whole studio, but I also wanted to show me reacting to my own tune. And the spinning chair became like a huge thing. It's just like people latch onto something that's different, basically, about that video. And in your case, it was your dressing gowns and your dancing and your Weetabix consumption. And like just these quirky little things that are a little bit different, basically. And then obviously the authenticity. you put the dressing gown on, you notice the comments, and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to wear a dressing gown every video now.
Only for the morning ones, like in the evening,
Right.
because I was doing 5 every morning, and then 5 every evening. Right?
5 every morning.
Yeah.
5 records every morning.
Yeah.
Then. Wow.
Yeah. It's time consuming because it's not just fire and forget. You don't just post the content.
No.
You have to go back and check the comment sentiment because sometimes you say something wrong or you say something that's misconstrued, and then you need to take the video off, re-edit it, and repost it because I'm not here to cause controversy. That's a cheap way of driving engagement.
Yeah.
Right? You can do it, but it will also bring you a lot of negativity as well. Right? It's get enough negativity just by being positive and successful without like deliberately doing stuff like that.
Okay, that's relentless.
Right?
That's like relentlessly sharing music. And you know what? Like that point of relentlessly sharing music, this is what kind of makes you different, I think. And this is why I certainly was interested in talking to you, because I'm actually very critical of like the current emphasis on social media over people being artists, producers first. And, you know, people get viral moments and they have big careers. But I think where you are different, and this is why I was interested in talking to you, is that it's not of a viral moment. It's very much not a viral moment. It's relentless, everyday graft, and the number one thing, which is curating and sharing music, right? Which is essentially what a job of a DJ is. You curate, you share that music with the public, and you build communities from that because you become a trusted source of music in people's lives. And I remember like one video that I saw from you, which basically was like, yeah, this guy like knows his stuff. It was you shared this record called Dancing in the Dark that
Fortune 500,
yes, which was one of my favorites back in the days.
Track.
I think that came around 2002 or something, 2002, 2003. And that was one of the first house records that I bought on vinyl because before that I was like a UK garage guy.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I was like, we're the same generation, like we went out at the same times, he knows his stuff, you know? Okay, awesome. So at this point now you're sharing music, you know, doing 5 videos in the morning and then 5 videos in the evening as well?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Okay. Are these all going up, like is this batch content creating? So like I'm just trying to get behind the nuts and bolts of this.
No, just sit and do 5, post them. Do 5 in the evening, post those.
You would literally do like 10 posts a day then?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. And I was kind of burning through my record collection at this point, as you can imagine. I probably had about 1,500 records
exactly,
at that point. Right? But I was kind of totally addicted to it at that point because it was such a positive. I was getting so much positive comments from people going, just like what you said there, you've taken me back to my youth, or I'd forgotten all about this. And then the nicest thing was getting messages from people saying, I've just got all my records out of the garage, I've got my records out of the attic, I've just bought some
I'm
decks.
re-engaging with my collection.
Well,
basically.
one guy saying, I've just me and my dad like don't get on that well, but we've like bonded over watching like your videos and getting into the music, and you know, messages like that from people that it just means everything to like feel that you've just by sharing something that you love and you're passionate about, that you've impacted people in a positive way. And then I started getting some DJs following me, which was like just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And then that list kind of like blew.
I remember when you did one of my releases that I released on Kerry Chandler's label, Chaos Theory.
Chaos Theory, yeah.
And I was like, that was like actually a genuine proper moment for me. Where it's like Fish shared one of my videos, and I remember you did one with Josh Baker as well, and I sent it to Josh, and I said like, Josh, you made it, and he was like honestly, I've only heard positivity from the scene about, you know, you sharing music and doing what you're doing. It's just great to see where it's all headed. Now, okay, so like I don't want to cut you short in this story because this is super interesting. So now you're sharing a lot of music, you're seeing your accounts blowing up. When did the first people start reaching out to you for asking you to DJ and to see if you want to go play?
It happened fairly early on, and actually probably before I was even doing before I'd actually switched the account to music content, I had a few people. I had quite a few people going. So I entered a competition.
Even off the car stuff already?
Yeah, because I was still covering some music stuff and doing like a few records, and I had a few like small promoters contacting me, but it was always, I just didn't have the confidence firstly, right? Because playing out in front of people and stuff, you know.
It takes a lot,
Yeah, it does. It's at the start, right? Obviously it becomes, you get more used to it, but I actually entered the competition to play on a stage at Boomtown in 2023, which Locked On Records were hosting, and I did a 10-minute mix, and I wish I could find it. I spent hours searching for it because I do get people like questioning like my vinyl like mixing credentials and stuff. And I did this 10-minute speed garage mix where I did go in for about 7 tunes, and it did take me probably about like 10 or 15 goes to get every single. But you know, after a while, you learn where all the cue points are. And, you know, and I did a really, really nice mix with some classic stuff on it, and a few newer tracks as well. And the guy Locked On said it was just down to me or one other person, right? Apparently for this competition, but I didn't win it.
Legendary label, by the way.
Legendary label, like some of the all-time greats, like Zed Bias, The Streets, The Streets. And yeah, so that was a bit disappointing, but it was just one of those kind of like early outlying incidents that took place that made me think, okay, maybe it just got my mind working, thinking actually maybe. And I had a few promoters contacted me, but it was like small promoters, little bits here and there. It was never like a very consistent or anything that I felt was, you know, like a kind of a consistent proposition. It was always a little bit, we might be doing a night in a month and stuff. And I was a bit nervous about it anyway. So none of that ever really came to fruition. But then one guy contacted me in only January 2024. And he said, I know the guys at Hidden in Manchester. We could do a different concept there where you play all night long. Right. And I said, what's the capacity? And he said 600. And I thought, there's no way you're going to get 600 people come along to see me. That's ridiculous, right? But he totally twisted my arm, this guy, in a good way. And he just said, I think you're underestimating like the interest, right?
You clearly were.
Yeah, well, I can see that now because, and I said to him, my biggest fear just in life is having a party that no one turns up to, right? And
it happens.
No.
And the thing is, it happens to everybody at every level, by the way, right? People have like, 100K plus followers, big names around the world, and sometimes they'll find themselves playing in front of 25 people, you know? It just never gets posted because we only post the good stuff on social media, you know what I mean? So it happens to all kinds of people. So then he books you to play this party.
Well, we did a deal together with the club, which is not the best deal like financially, but it was just, again, it just wasn't about that, right? But I just said to him, look, you've got to put the tickets at like $5 or something because it's like I can't. Otherwise, it's just going to kill it. It's going to be so awkward. Like it's my biggest fear. But he didn't listen to me, and the club didn't listen, and they priced them at like normal headliner type rates for a night at Hidden. So the tickets were like, you know, kind of 18 quid early bird, and then went up to like £25 sort of thing. But it sold out within about 2 weeks.
Madness.
And that was about 2 months before the event. So before even that had happened, I thought, okay, well, you know, obviously there's a bit more to it than I thought.
That's what you call hard ticket value.
Yeah.
And that's when promoters start listening, when you can bring people through the door.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, you know, you'll get people that will say you only get booked because you've got big Insta following, but like per night on a 600 cap venue and see if you can get people to come through the door on the strength of your name and appeal. And if you've built an audience and built a community and you've got people that like you and interested in you and they come along and you do a few of those, then you'll find that other promoters and festivals will take notice because people are tapped into what's going on in the industry.
Absolutely. That's how it works. Word goes around very quickly, you know, when, you know, this guy is a ticket seller, you know. At what point did things start professionalizing? Did agents approach you at that point as well?
So I had, I put on 2 more nights of my own, one in Birmingham and one in Newcastle, which were arranged and organised before this one in Manchester took place. And a similar thing happened with the ticket sales there, right?
So you worked with a promoter at those parties?
No, I just did those. I just contacted the club myself.
Right, okay.
Right. But, you know, the thing is with these clubs is one of them was World Headquarters and the other one was Zumhof in Birmingham, which used to be Air and Code, where God's Kitchen used to be. And that was a chance thing because the person who was the manager there, Carly, contacted me just to say, I know you're really into your trance. We've got an old school like night coming up with Lounge and Fergie and a few others. Like, would you like to come down? And I said, well, I'd like to, yeah. But like also, would you know, is there any interest in putting a night on? Yeah. They had the Oxygen room upstairs, which is where the Tidy Boys used to play. It's like 350 cap room. And she said, okay, well, we'll see how the thing in Manchester goes. But obviously the thing in Manchester went well. I made contact, kind of more through a kind of coincidence, with a guy who's got an agency and has worked in the dance music scene for quite a long time. And he came along to this night in Manchester just to see what it was about because he was curious as to what sort of crowd it would be, whether it was a crowd that would come along just to see it, a one-off gig with the guy from social media or, you know, whatever. But the thing that we were all surprised, everyone was surprised by, not least for me, was the kind of level of fanaticism of support, right? You had people tweeting, you had people posting stories, driving all the way down from Glasgow, coming up from London, you know, to see Fish. And then when the doors opened, there was this kind of like like wave of 18, 19, 20-year-olds like surging forward to the front, like, you know, chanting.
Did that feel surreal to you?
Wanting to take photos and shake my hand and stuff like that, which is like totally alien to me. I've had people come up to me before, but not like that, right? And then I thought, and it just stayed like that all night. And I played a 5-hour set, didn't go to the toilet once, hadn't drunk any alcohol, thankfully. And I played a 5-hour set that started off with like kind of progressive trance, and then I played trance. It was all old music, nothing new at all on all my old vinyls that I'd been digitizing or buying up again on Beatport, and played trance, a load of hard house, techno, and then I finished off with some acid techno at the end, you know, like this old sort of kind of squat party music from the 90s, Chris Liberator and all that stuff on Prolocult Records. And he was like banging the whole way through. And I stood up on the decks at the end because they're hidden, you're level with the dance floor, so you can't really see any more than the people in front of you.
Right.
And I stood up on the decks at the end and it was still full all the way to the back at 5 in the morning, and everyone started cheering. And I was like, wow.
That was the second night you put on?
That was the first one.
The first one, right?
26th of March.
I mean, look, it goes to show it's very organic. You know, you've built this community, and I always say that our job as artists and DJs and electronic music producers is to build communities. You know, and you've built this massive community first, and then when you put on the event, you know, like it's a sellout. That's not surprising with the amount of graft that you put into building your community. So at that point, are you thinking of, okay, maybe I can do this as a regular thing? How many nights have you put on since?
So I've only done those first 3 at the beginning,
right,
and they were spaced out about a month apart. And I just thought, you know, look, I'll just do one of these a month and I'll keep my job ticking over. I never thought I'd be like looking to replace my job because like, you know, I've got a mortgage, wife, kids, and all that, and it's it's extremely enjoyable. But obviously, the hours of like very antisocial.
And putting on your own nights is also very stressful.
Yeah.
Very stressful. How did you negotiate like those deals with the clubs? How did you know about even like how to negotiate a deal with a club?
Well, it wasn't like with the clubs. Like with the first one, the guy like did a deal where like him and me versus the club like took half of the door once the costs had been taken out. So I got a quarter of the door. Turned out there are quite a lot of costs involved in that we hadn't anticipated. But, you know, that's like one of those learnings that you make. You know, I'm sure a lot of promoters go through that. You know, you get hit with a photography charge and stuff like that. And you just think, you know, on one hand, you could resent it and get annoyed by it. But on the other hand, that's how an industry operates. Yeah. I don't know anything about this industry. And
you got to learn the ropes.
And that's what happens. You learn the ropes, right? Yeah. But I was never doing it for the money, so I didn't care anyway. I was just happy to stand in front of people and play them a load of old records from that they'd never heard before, from that were massive for me when I was, you know, like their age, right? That was it. The next nights that I did with the other 2 clubs, we just agreed like a higher charge for the venue, and I took the door, right? So that was not a difficult like thing. And you know, with a higher charge for the clubs, I wasn't overly fussed about the about going too much into the
at that point. You actually kind of knew, like, okay, I'm probably going to fill this club. You know, how many people can I get through the door? And it's a much easier calculation, I guess.
It wasn't too difficult because, you know, like for World HQ, I probably paid like $1,000 or something like that for a hard charge, and that's probably high, right? But you know, you think how many tickets have I got to sell? Like, you know, at 20 quid to fill that, right? It's like versus the capacity of the club. And after the experience in Manchester, I was like, I was pretty confident I could break even on that, right? So, but then this guy Chris, who's my agent, he came along to the night in Manchester. This is before we were committed to do anything together. Obviously, I was weary as well about something.
You have
like
an
that.
agent at this stage, then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right from the start.
Can you just take me to the point where, like, how did he become aware of you, and how did this happen? Like, how did you sign on to the agency?
Chris had a co-worker who was a producer as well,
right?
And I played some of his music on my channel, and they had a conversation that started up in the office,
right?
And I ended up having a phone call with Chris, but at the time I just thought, this is a waste of time, isn't it? You know, like I'm only going to be doing a few nights like this.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I thought, you know, I come from a business background. I thought, like, what's 10 minutes of my time talking to this guy and seeing what he can offer? And the thing that, I mean, they can't, and this is something that, you know, like kind of, I think all DJs and producers need to be real about, right? You know, good agent, good manager, they can't get you gigs if there isn't demand there for the product. What they can do is
amplify it. Yeah,
they can amplify your like your proposition. So it's not even just about, you know, obviously once you've even just played a few gigs and you've you know, you've videoed it and you've put some content out there and stuff like that, straight away you've got proof points of your success, right? And they can amplify that, like you just said. And it was easy to do that when I'd sold 3 hard ticket shows. It was then easy to talk to promoters because they know promoters, but they're not going to go and push their product to the promoter if it's not then going to drive ticket sales, because then the promoter won't listen to them anymore. So you've got to be realistic about if you've done 3 hard ticket events and sold them out, then giving you a slot on an existing event as a DJ on the lineup is less risky and more appealing. And then the promoters, a lot of stuff goes on in the digital world now. It's very, very digital. The promoters, when they start advertising the events, they'll look at the comments and they'll look at, and they'll do that if they're good promoters. They'll look at the split testing of their ads. So when you put an ad out announcing that you've got X has just been added to the lineup, they'll look at the response to that versus when they first announced the event.
It's very data-driven now.
Yeah, as a lot of businesses are. It is a business. The promoters have to make money as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So those conversations are easier to have when you've got that track record. And then the events that I did were just like the rooms that I played in were busy. That's all I can say. I played at Beaver Works in Leeds. I did an event at Brickworks where again it was just a single headliner thing, but it was with a promoter which sold out weeks before the event. And and other promoters, even if they're not talking to each other, they can always click onto a site and see if it's sold out, see where the ticket sales are at. So it kind of grew from there. I think I play in quite a few different genres. I've always been into that. I've always liked, at the start it was hardcore, drum and bass, happy hardcore. I've had phases when I've been well into house music. When trance came along in the late 90s, I got well into that for quite a period of time, and then hard house for a bit afterwards. Then I got back into drum and bass around like 2010 when acts like Netsky and, like Logistics and Hospital Records and all that kind of era. Got well into that for a bit, then got back into house music because I got more focused on going to Ibiza. And I've always kind of kept my ear in, and I've always got periods of time within dance music where I can talk about a genre. If I was talking about drum and bass, there's loads of gaps in my knowledge, right? But there's also eras of it that I know quite well.
I think you have a really encyclopedic knowledge of music, because one thing I noticed whenever you're presenting a track or and you're playing a record, is that you quite often have quite a sort of a long backstory to that tune. It's like, is that something that you research when you record that, and you're like, hey, let's find out if I missed anything on the backstory of this track, or is this something that you just picked up naturally because you're curious?
So some of the records that have come into my collection have been passed to me. I've actually 2 guys have gifted me record collections, right? And sometimes I'll play something, I'll have a flick through and think, what am I going to play? And I'll recognise an artist and I'll play it and I think, this is a really, really good tune. And then I'll do a bit of Googling on it and look into it. And sometimes it will turn out that there is often a backstory. And sometimes there's stuff that I miss. Because I definitely don't know everything. I've got a reasonably broad knowledge, but it doesn't go that deep in every every year and every subgenre and stuff. I've got loads that I can learn myself, and I'm always learning. But there are all the stuff that was records that I've gone out and I've bought myself. There's often a backstory, and I don't know why, but I've got quite a detailed memory for that sort of thing. Now, I always thought this was a totally useless skill. So if you...
it's not. It's super important.
But if anyone out there thinks I've got a useless skill, fair enough, it's rolling your tongue or whatever, right? But any useful skill that you've got, any useless skill that you've got is a skill that can possibly be used for something, right?
Totally. And having this voracious appetite to finding out about the history of dance music as well, I think is so important. On Dojo, I always encourage my students to kind of go to the past. If they want to invent the future, they've got to know the past first, because, music works in cycles. Everything comes around again and again and again. And it's like, listen to current house sound, it's very 90s inspired, very rave inspired, like old sample packs are now a thing, people are like, the kids are like swapping like files of 90s sample packs like vintage vinyl. I would have never thought that vintage sample packs would be a thing, but people are picking up on those sounds. So I always encourage people to just, just discover the wealth of music that's out there. And I call it building a genealogy of artists. And maybe you can relate to that as well. Like, first you find out about this guy, right? And so it's like, okay, what has he done? On what labels is he at? And then that takes you down the rabbit hole. Okay, like what else is on that label, And then you find out, okay, maybe I can find some interviews of this artist, right? And then like, what are his heroes? Who are his heroes? And what are his influences? And it goes like layers and layers and layers and layers. Obviously it's endless, you can keep going down that rabbit hole forever. But it just uncovers such a rich history of music. And I think that's why people also resonate with you, is because, it's not just current music. It's a lot of stuff from the past that, you know, some people may know, and like myself, I watch it and it's like, oh, I remember that tune, but I hadn't thought about it until you showed me again, you know. But it's also like a lot of younger sort of fans that you have that you're probably introducing to music that they would have never heard before otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's super rewarding,
yeah,
right? And people comment on that and they say, "Oh, I've discovered some new music from you," and that's, you know, knowledge is one of the few things that you can give away without diminishing like your own stock of it, if you see what I mean, right?
Yeah,
you can give away as
totally.
much knowledge as you want, and you'll still have, but you get all the enrichment from the satisfaction of sharing with
I like
people
that
as
a lot,
well, you know.
actually.
And it's a beautiful thing. My dad does a similar thing on a totally different area, right? In his vocation, right? But it's slightly higher culture. You know, it's all to do with like the arts and history and theatre and you know, opera and classical music and history and stuff. And he weaves it together and talks about it in a very interesting way. And that's his thing. And I just think, you know, sharing knowledge with people and introducing people to music, it's just like a very beautiful thing. It's a very positive thing as well. You know, it's just you're just giving people for free without them having to pay anything. You're just sharing something and enriching people, and you know, it's a really nice thing to do, and it does build a community. And then, you know, as I found out, it turned out to be something that then led somewhere for me, but it absolutely wasn't my intention at the start. And to find myself now rekindling that dream that I had as a, you know, you saw the pictures when I was 15 in my bedroom with my decks and stuff, that thing where I never really applied myself as hard as, I mean, the passion was there, you know, going out and buying the records and all that, but the application wasn't there. I didn't know how to channel it. I didn't put the effort in. I had other things going on in my life at the time, and it wasn't the focus that it could have been. But I don't know if I'd have been as successful then anyway, because you know, a lot of what you learn, you know, you kind of mature as you get older, right? Most people do a little bit, and you learn.
You know what? Sometimes I think it's better when things happen at a later stage for people. You know, I was a bit of a late bloomer myself, and I feel that sometimes it can make you more focused. It can make you a lot more directed. It can make you a lot more strategic. And the pitfalls aren't as big a pitfalls anymore, because the pitfalls when you're younger is essentially just partying too much, getting on it too much. And when you're getting older, you just don't have that desire anyway, you know what I mean?
True.
Like, you can't physically just go on a 3 or 4 day bender with functioning on Monday, you know? So I think sometimes things happening a little bit later to you is almost as an advantage, you know, because you're that much more focused. You've now put on your free events, you've sold them out, you're clearly seeing that there's demand there, you have an agent. I remember you at one point posting your calendar for the month. I think it was like a year ago, like in the summer or something, including Glasto being on there and stuff like that. And I was like, holy shit, something's happening here. Like, I remember you actually, I think that was your caption. It's like, what the hell's going on? Like, so at this point, you're still working full time?
Yeah, because I quit my job in August.
Right, and you have a full calendar?
Yeah. I was busy.
Did that just happen pretty much like within the space of a couple of months overnight, or was it a slow ramp up so you could get accustomed to it a little bit?
So the calendar, like, I wasn't really busy until about kind of July, August onwards. Right?
Last year.
Because it's, you know, I did an event in March, one in April, a couple in May, and you know, it sort of trickles up because a lot of like lineups for bigger events are set anyway, right? So, and then obviously there's that other thing. Some of the promoters are very forward looking, or willing to take a chance on something that's a bit of a wild card, and then there are other promoters, festival stage bookers, etc., that are a bit more like conservative, or it's just not their flavour of the month. And you know, I understand that, right? But you know, people's opinions change over time, and I think it got quite busy, and I was at Boomtown, was like my last week in my old job. I really wanted to keep it going for a bit longer than that and try and have a bit more of a solid financial base under me before I quit my job. But I wasn't able to give both strands the attention that they both needed. It wasn't fair to my employer that I was like, you know, kind of tired and that my mind was elsewhere and stuff. I'd always done well at work. In my last year at work, I got nominated for MVP twice, like out of 4 quarters, which is, I know people like, you know, laugh at that sort of thing a little bit, but it's like, you know, it's a recognition from management that you're doing a good job. And it's like, didn't win it, but I got nominated twice. So I was, you know, I was working hard, and I had some really nice co-workers who I miss now. I still speak to them occasionally, a few of them. that was all nice, but I didn't want to, like I said before, I didn't want to be that guy where people started going, oh, he's taking his foot off the gas now. You can see his focus is shifting and stuff. So I made that big decision, and at that time, Ange and me, I'd saved up enough money from the DJing that we could have survived for about probably 3 months, right? Which is nowhere near long enough, to be comfortable.
But you've got to take a risk.
Yeah, but I did, and I just took a risk on it, and then. And it's worked out really well. And then the music production, I've been ramping up substantially. Like I've produced 110 tracks in the last 12 months, right? Of which the first one's only just coming out now. And, you know, we've all been on that journey, right? The early stuff, you go back to and you just think, fuck me, this is rubbish, right? But it's, you know, every single thing you do, you learn, and there's so much help out there.
And you're also allowed to grow in the public eye. Like you don't have to come out fully formed as like an amazing artist. I always say like, there's a lot of people that I've met alongside my career who were never happy with their music and overly critical with their own stuff, never ended up releasing anything because they're so overly critical. Also, you're allowed to grow in the public eye. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your average tune from early on is somebody's favorite tune.
Maybe,
There's somebody out there and it's going to be their favorite tune, you know? And then you get better and better and better. And also, it's like, it's a lot more human for people to buy into your story when they see, look, there's a progression here. He's getting better. And they've been following you. Like, sometimes I get people write to me, it's like, I've been following you since that and that EP. And I don't even play those tracks anymore because I was like, oh my God, like that was like awful, you know?
Yeah.
But they've bought into the story. They've bought into the whole journey. And it's really important to do that in the public eye and not aim for perfect because there's no such thing as perfect. So did you get to that point where like, I mean, obviously now you're switching to like being a full-time DJ. When the gigs were ramping up, were you then pretty much considering that you want to do this full-time? Like, or was this something, it became just self-evident where like the gigs are becoming so much that you're thinking, okay, I can make more money here, I can be more fulfilled, I can do less mundane work. How was that decision-making process?
It was more the second thing that you said in that it became clear to me that if it continued at the trajectory it was at, that it would be a viable replacement for my career, because my first commitment's to my family, right? You know, we're just, like you said, and to young people in the advantageous situation of not having those, I wouldn't say burdens, to describe your family as a burden's not very nice, but you understand it's commitments.
Commitments, right? Yes.
But it became clear that it was on a trajectory that was growing, and that it was, that it would be feasible to replace my, like, you know, my kind of.
And then obviously, like, did you sit down with your wife and have discussions about how that would look? Did you have to have discussions about how it would impact family life and stuff, being on the road at weekends? Because it is a big shift. People always think like, I think people have like sometimes a misconception of what it means to be, you know, a touring DJ, because people go, it's like, well, you just party for a living, like on Fridays and Saturdays, and the rest of the time, like, I remember going for dinner with one of my mates in Australia, and there were some other friends there, and he just said to me, Ben doesn't work, he's a DJ. And I was just like, you have no idea.
No, it's
you have no idea, because it's full on during the week having to run your career, and then also you have to be on the road at weekends. So like, how was that transition for you and your family?
So I was the senior EMEA marketing manager for a big US tech firm, and I can tell you this is much harder, right? Much harder work and much longer hours as well.
Okay.
Right. And yes, you do get some time off and you're the master of your own destiny. And then when the DJing is amazing, like, don't get me wrong, like nothing beats that standing in front of a crowd of people, like playing one of your own tracks as well, and you get a reaction from the audience is unreal. But all the motivation and all of the strategy has to come from within, right? And the discipline. And like you say, it is easier when you're older, because if this had happened to me when I was younger, when I was still like going out, like partying quite a lot, if you're very easy, and I see it a lot with young DJs.
Get distracted.
Yeah, get distracted, but nicely, you know, go off the rails a bit with it, right? And I don't have to worry so much about that, because I've kind of like been there, done that. And, you know, it's like I'm more focused on music production and on DJing and then having the time with my family. So when I finish now, normally I'm not going to like afters and stuff like that, but I'm trying to get home so I can have a normal Sunday with my family. But my family, to answer your question, have been super supportive.
Amazing.
And that's been very helpful. Like my wife, Ange, she's a bit of a legend, you know, like very, very patient, and she knows I'm living my dream right now, and she's very supportive. because these opportunities they're just one in a million. You know, they are one in a million, and you just have to grab them with both hands. And
absolutely,
and that's it. And my parents, I thought, who are typically small c conservative, well, I have to hasten to add they're not conservative voters. It was conservative small c, as in, you know, they've got slightly old. They're heading towards 80 years old, and they were much more supportive than I thought they'd be. I told my dad, I said, look, I'm probably going to quit my job in the next month. And my dad went, well, you know, if you think it makes sense financially, I think you should do it as soon as you can, because he could see that it was hard for me trying to do both the things. Which was surprising. But it's
I remember when you put up the post that you're going full time with music, and I went in the comment section and I was just astounded about the reach of your audience, because you had some pretty big names commenting on there. We had like Tiesto on there. David Guetta. Like, how did that feel?
Yeah, just very validating.
Yeah.
Very validating, to be honest, to have. And, you know, I have a lot of...
being welcomed also in the community,
yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's very validating. And I'm very fortunate in the following that I've got, because I've got a lot of those big names, and then I've got people that are like very credible, solid like names in the scene, such as yourself, and you know, just people that are just rated as people that are just rated as solid, credible industry producers that are just, you know, well respected and whatever. And to have dialogues with people like that, and to send you my music, and for you to send me your music, and have that kind of interface is you know, is a very nice feeling. You know, it's a very nice place to be.
Having said that, I've got to get you on my promo list for my label.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Like, I'll get you on there. Amazing. I mean, so now we come to the present moment, and it's been pretty mental, man. Like, just seeing, you know, when we arrived here at the podcast studios, I saw you being stopped in the street by somebody who like said hello. You know, you're clearly getting recognized in the public. Is it enjoyable? Like, is it mental? Is it surreal? Like, describe it to me. Like, what's going on right now?
It's all positive, you know, and it's all validation that what I'm doing is working, and they're all just really nice people. So yeah, I don't mind it at all. And it's funny, actually, it's given me a bit more credibility with my kids, like Sasha, who's 9, who thought Dad was a bit uncool dancing in a dressing gown, and now you've got like people coming over for selfies in the street, so that's helped. But you know, but more than that is that I've you know, the community is a word that you've used many times. It's something that, it wasn't something that had really occurred to me, but looking back now, I see, you know, that I have built a loose community of people that are kind of like good-natured, open-minded, interested music lovers who turn out to be very good people to come along to your gigs, because the gigs that I play, like I'll go along and play like a hard techno event, and all I'll play is hard techno. Or if I'm playing, like, you know, we were on the bill for Abode, weren't we, at Eden, right, last summer. Yeah. So if I go along to that, I'm just only going to play tech house. I'm not going to start like trying to play garage or drum and bass at house. But when I do my own headline shows, I normally, or for a longer festival set, I'll normally go on a bit of a journey, and it's not all over the place. It's not house, drum and bass, house, garage. It's not like that at all. I'll start off at a BPM, and I'll build it up gradually, and it will go on a longer set. It will start from house, and it will end up with drum and bass. But I've given some thought as to the transitions, and so that it's not jarring. But my audience are quite open-minded, and they want to hear all that stuff. But that's another thing I
love, Fish. That's another thing I love, is that you haven't pigeonholed yourself into one genre, and that you still expressing your curiosity for all kinds of different music, and then putting that in one set. There's very few DJs that do that. I think like one of the only people that takes people on full-on musical journeys is like Laurent Garnier, you know, who will put drum and bass and house and techno in the same set, and it all makes sense, you know. And that takes some planning, it takes musical knowledge, takes passion, takes digging, takes time to find that kind of music. So hats off to that. And now, what does your touring schedule look like? Like,
that was wild.
Just share with us a little bit what's going on this summer.
So yeah, I mean, I've got a week in the summer where I'm doing like, I've got a few weeks where I'm doing like 6 or 7 back to back all around Europe and stuff. Like every weekend in the summer's booked out. I've got a really cool week in Ibiza where I'm doing. Actually, I can't say, but I've got some
good stuff coming up.
Really good stuff. Like mind blowing for Ibiza. Like I'm playing at Pikes as well, which is like a real like fun
bucket
one. Yeah, it is a
list
bucket
one.
list one. Like, the big club's amazing as well. And then I'm flying off. I'm doing some cool ones like Electric Castle, and I'm playing Hideout, and then I'm doing like Worried About Henry in Croatia, which is drum and bass, and then I'm going to and then I'm doing like Doof in the Park, like Hannah Lang's event up in Scotland, which will be all hard techno. So it's really good for me and Chris because it's varied, and you know, you get all of the musical variety as well. I've got a tour of America in November, which is pretty exciting. And can't wait. I haven't been to America for a long time.
Do you have an audience over there, like in terms of your following?
Guess we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah. I mean, look, America is a special thing in itself. It's one of the biggest markets in the world, but they are relentless. They are like, it's very much about hard ticket value. But I think like your audience will probably transcend, you know. There's bound to be a few Americans in there in those 600,000.
So I've got 632 on Insta and 460 on
There's a million
TikTok.
followers. There's got to be a couple of Americans in there. Don't worry.
Yeah, you never know. Like I'm playing Webster Hall in Manhattan as the first date. But when we dropped the tour poster for New York, for America, it did get a good response. And again, like
there you go.
And since then, we've had other promoters contact us and go, "Can we add this? Can we add our city? Can we add our city here and there and stuff?" So that's a good sign. But yeah, I mean, I did a tour in Australia and New Zealand last year. Yeah, amazing.
One of my
amazing.
favorite places to tour, Australia. Yeah. It's just great food, beautiful nature, and the Aussies are just a special breed.
They're good fun. It's a bit like Ireland, but a bit sunnier in terms of the crowd, right? It was amazing in Australia. Like, I flew in, I played a few big festivals. I played on the main stage of the largest festival in Australia, which is Beyond the Valley in Melbourne, and I was 2 acts before Chasing Status, and the stage was full, and it was like, that was a real moment for me, and that was the full Fishtails set. So I started off with house music, and then I worked through, like, played some garage, and then a bit of hard groove.
It's called
Fishtails. That's what I call my set.
Right.
Had 90 minutes, a bit of trance, and I played a few hard tech tracks, a few of my own productions dropped in there. Most of it was stuff that's from underground artists, but there were a few big tracks as well, and then with a little drum and bass finish for 10 minutes at the end, and just took the audience on a bit of a journey, and it was that was cool. And then they got me to do a little pop-up like an hour later, like a little Red Bull were doing little mini pop-up things. So I did that, and I just played hard techno for an hour. And I played. We flew back via Southeast Asia, and I played at EDC. And in Bali at Ulu Cliff House.
I played at Ulu Cliff House.
It's wicked.
Last month was amazing.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Literally last month I was playing there. It's a really beautiful place.
Yeah.
Did they put you in the nice room on the suite on the side, on the right hand side, where you got the view over the sea?
I was like at the top right in the middle, looking down.
Over the sea. They put you in that amazing room, which is kind of almost like a little building to itself, kind of thing. Yeah.
But I got to tell you, when I was staying there, right, we were there for a week because we had a week to fill in between that and then when we flew over to do EDC. And I spent like almost all day, every day on my little laptop in that room just doing music production because, I wrote a track called Ulu, which I've had mastered and I've played a few times, but I just knew that I've just got to keep
capture that moment,
but getting better and better and better at it as well. And watching those YouTube tutorials and watching tips and learning this and learning that. And I've just got to the point now where the music that I'm making is like, I'm comfortable releasing it, right? And I could have spent a week sitting by the pool and having a lovely time, like soaking up the sun and stuff, but it was like I wanted to focus like single-mindedly on that. I've never worked as hard at anything in my life as I have with this. And you've got the music production, social media, the DJing and touring, and then you've got all the business stuff you have to do around that, having conversations with people about things, a lot of which goes nowhere and stuff like that. And it's the most rewarding, satisfying thing ever. But it's also like the hardest work imaginable.
It's like I'm with you on that, and like getting better at making music is just like it's not a quick or easy process. It literally, as you said, it's grinding. It's putting in the hours. It's doing it again and again and again and again, and then almost by like without you noticing, things start falling into place and magic ensues. And then like you'll get the feedback instantly, from the audience, whether it resonates or not. But it's one thing that's really hard. It's like you never know which ones are going to be the ones that take off. Whatever you think is going to take off is probably not the one that takes off. And the one that you thought, this is kind of all right, that's when people are like getting on it. It's so hard to predict.
It's savage when you play your own music and no one knows it's your own music, right?
Yeah.
It's the most brutal measure of whether you've done something good or not. I played 2 at Lost Paradise. One of them got pretty much the best reaction out of everything I played in my set, which was mega exciting, but it was a track that I'd never looked to release because it was just something I did that was a bit of a throwback to a hard house track that I made. It had some Hoovers in it and stuff. It got really good reaction, but it wouldn't be where I'd be positioning my brand right now. And then the other one that I played, which was one that I thought, this is the one that's got a potential to really go somewhere, got a very flat reaction, and you just think, well, I'll go back to the drawing board, go back to put Hoover in it.
And the thing is, this is the beauty of it. You have to test them. You have to test the music, and the audience is the judge. You know, it's very hard to tell before what resonates or what not. We're not very good judges of our own music. Like, you need other feedback. And like, do you ever get that thing when you're working on a tune and like, you know, one moment you feel like you're the king of the world. This is sounding wicked. Then you're going for lunch. You're coming back to a tune and it just sounds shit.
Or play it to someone else and you can hear in yourself as you're listening to it. It isn't as good as you thought it was. You're hearing it
through their eyes, and all of a sudden your excitement's gone. I have a mentor. Well, I used to have a mentor that I worked with called Mike Monday, who was a producer.
I know Mike Monday.
You know, of course you know him.
Yeah.
So Mike Monday has been coaching for a long time, and he's kind of the Yoda of music producers, kind of like a wise sort of sage that gives you musical advice. And he used to say to me, when you enter the studio, leave judgment at the door. That was one of the big ones that he told me. And another one that he told me was, if you were excited about what you're making at some point during the creative process, it's worth finishing. Yeah. Even although your feelings might have changed right now. Because we're not really good judges of our own best work, basically. Yeah. And ultimately, it's the audience that decides. So whenever you feel excited about something, it's worth finishing. Okay, like, this has been amazing to hear your story thus far, and we're not finished yet. So now you have an insane touring schedule. You've got a full calendar. You have got a DJ career as a professional DJ. Who would have thought? Not planned for. Yeah. It just kind of happened. But you've also started a label. So tell me about the label a little bit, and what is your aim with putting out other people's music and also maybe your own music?
So the label is an imprint. So it's not like I haven't taken on like, you know, the full like thing of like managing starting up and managing a whole business, because I think that would just be like too much at this stage. And also you get the mentorship and guidance and you get the ear of a established business. So I'm working, it's an imprint with Another Rhythm, which is a kind of like boutique, like quite cool little, like smaller, but still, I mean, they've got a sizable operation. They've got good, like, you know, kind of like marketing and A&R and all that stuff, and they're funded and all of that, but it's also not like the huge record label where you risk kind of getting swallowed up, or if the first record you put out isn't great, then you're sort of like left in purgatory. It's a little bit more personable than that. And the imprint's called Octagon Discs. So I'm basically putting my music out on it, but also doing some A&Ring. And it's one thing that struck me is how much slower and more considered it is than I expected it to be. Coming from a business background where things can sometimes be done a lot faster than. I'm actually wearing some Another Rhythm socks.
Ah, nice one.
Just by coincidence. But it was. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, actually. Yeah. And, you know, I think people get frustrated when on social media they go, oh, when is this song coming out? You know, listening to it for a year. And people think that the labels are doing it to annoy or to build up demand and stuff. But a lot of the time, it's just to do with how many releases you're physically able to put out without overcrowding, like the previous ones that you've put out.
Are you doing vinyl or just digital?
So the first one we did on vinyl, right, and that was a record. And this is the one thing that I've discovered I really love doing, like, is helping get music from smaller producers out there, because I know what the struggle's like. Yeah. And I'm in a position now where it's easier for me to get my music out there, although I'm being very critical about what I put out there. But for the vast majority of people that are producers that are waiting to get their break, the music's got to be 10 out of 10. They've probably got to try about make 15 or 20 records of that level before by chance someone will pick one up and start playing it. And even then, it's never a guarantee, right? It's very, very tough. Yeah. So to be in a position to help people is by far my biggest focus with this. Like, more so, I'm not really expecting it to make any money. It's more just about doing something that's fun, enjoyable, and helps other people. So the first record that I put out was by a guy called Declan Knapp, and it was it's much more than an edit of Groove Armada's Superstyling. It's a completely different track, but it's taken the vocal sample from that and put it into a future garage kind of sound, and it did really well. But I was the only person he sent it to, right? He sent it to me as an email, and I sent quite a lot of music, and I do try and listen to it all, but sometimes I can't. Or
Are you overwhelmed with being tracks?
Yeah,
sometimes
I get overwhelmed by it, but I do try and listen to it all because I know how much effort people put into making it. But I opened this one. I was the only person he sent it to, and I thought, well, that's really good, like really, really good. So I play tested it at a few places, including I was playing at Glastonbury. And I played it there, and the room just went, the tent just went wild. And
I think I saw that video.
Yeah, it was crazy reaction, and it happened everywhere I played it. So after 3 or 4 times, so when we were talking to Another Rhythm about setting Octagon discs up anyway, we said, look, we've got to this has got to be the first release on the label because this is it's a cool backstory, it's a wicked track. Everyone loves the original. So so we did that. And then the next 2 releases are my first 2 releases, so the one I sent you and the follow-up called Strike 2. And then after that, we've got another, it's quite a fun story actually. I was in Sydney and I was literally just scrolling Insta Reels and I saw a reel where these guys were like, oh, here's a track we've just done. It was a really kind of I guess it's like a hard groove record, but a modern, more banging kind of interpretation of that. 144 BPM, very banging tune. And I just thought that sounds like right up my street. So I DM'd the guy. I was like, have you got a master? And he was like, no, but we can get one. So they managed to get me a master over, and I was playing at the Ivy. It was on the 5th of January. Sundays, I think it's called Lost Sundays is the name of the party, right? And I played it there, and this guy was actually there in the crowd. I saw him, he was waving, he sort of identified himself. So just within the space of a day, I'd seen it, got him to send me a master, played it, and the guy got to hear it in the thing, and I thought, yeah, this is a really good track actually. And I played it a few times, always got a good reaction. So he managed to get that one as the release. So that's going to be the 4th release after my ones. Yeah. And it's a nice backstory because it is so hard getting noticed, and it actually is quite a positive. It's quite a positive thing about why social media matters and why you don't have to think about putting your heart and soul into a content strategy that takes you 5 hours a day and doing blah, blah, blah. You've just got to get enough content out there that you're increasing your chances of it getting above the parapet and someone seeing it. And I think that's a proof point of that. And I think it's a positive thing. It's a nice story. And then from there, the next thing we're doing is more ambitious than that, and it's called Skull of Fish. And that was a contest that I launched.
I love that. That's a great name, actually.
It started off as the Fish Tank, but it turns out that Fisher calls his Insta group that or something. So I can't do that. So School of Fish works quite well. And we opened it up to submissions from people in 3 categories: house, techno, and trance. And I honestly thought we'd get 100 submissions or something, but we got 1,600 submissions, of which I've listened to all of them, but it's taken me months, right? Because I wasn't willing just to listen to them.
Do you have somebody helping you with this stuff
it's just
now?
Me. I only do my own social media, and I think that's important actually, even at my level of following, because it's about relatability.
And with a label also, or do you have a label manager?
So I've got a label, but all the social stuff is me. So I'm with the label. I'm really doing A&R.
If you need a good label manager, I can sort you out.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
It makes your life so much easier. Yeah. It's you literally just end up curating, signing, and doing A&Ring, and the rest is out of your hands.
Oh, that's cool.
I've got to sort of really get into the social media thing one more time.
Yeah, sure.
I think social media is now such a big part of people's success, and knowing how to market yourself, knowing how to put out content. If you had to give advice to somebody trying to make it in 2025 in social media, with given your expertise in the field and your knowledge in the field, what are your tips for somebody that is just trying to, somebody that maybe has a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand followers and they're just trying to get noticed? Sure.
Okay. I think, firstly, it's really important to understand with social media, why the situation is the way it is, because it's always to some extent been a popularity contest, right? Even back in the olden days, people will sometimes say in the olden days a DJ was hidden out of view and then they'd empty the ashtrays at the end of the night. I don't remember it that way. I started going out in 1995. Yeah. I see flyers from Biology, Genesis, those early raves. They still had names on them. Yeah. Trevor Fung, Paul Oakenfold, whatever, right?
And proper billing, big names and in fat print. Yeah.
Shoom, whatever. Those flyers have names on them, right? And those names, all right, maybe in the olden days it was you had to be mates with the promoter or whatever, but there was always a mechanic for how you got yourself out there, right? It was never only about like standing there and technically well mixing good music together. That is obviously hugely important, and I'm not taking away from that. But it doesn't matter how good you are. I was very good when I was playing in my bedroom because I was doing it all the time. I could beat match perfectly and play really good sets and stuff. But I was never putting myself out there enough for it ever to gain any traction and take off. Social media makes it easier to get yourself out there and get traction and to drive that awareness, but it's a much bigger industry and there's a lot more people trying to do it at the moment, so that makes it harder as well. You've got to understand as well with the club scene, it used to be the case, you know, when we used to go out, we'd always look at the lineups and stuff like that. But again, if you lived somewhere like Manchester, you'd go to the Hacienda. If you lived in Newcastle, you'd go to the Shindig. If you lived in Liverpool, you'd go to Cream, and you'd discover new acts that way because there was a regular good night.
Go to the event or the club rather than just following the names.
That's it, and you would follow the names as well. But you know, there were a lot of places would only have a few events going on. Now it seems that clubbing is less of a thing and event spaces is more of a thing, and people are much more focused on looking at the lineups and looking at the names and stuff as a result of that. Whereas if it was, you know, we always used to go to Turmoils, it wouldn't matter. Sometimes you'd go in there and it would mainly be progressive house all night, sometimes you'd go there and it would mainly be hard house all night, right? But it was that was fine because we just like going there.
You just go to the club. You
go to the club, and that's not such a thing anymore because of event spaces and clubs closing down and changing, and also because it's possible now for people to do this research very easily and look online and see who they are. So, you know, social media, I get that a lot of people like hate it and they're nervous about it and they're shy about it, they don't understand it and all of that. But you know, looping right back to what I said at the start of this, go back to my content when I was making content about watches at the start and look at how unconfident I was and how nervous I was and how like crap the content was, right? And see where I've taken that to where I am now, where I'm kind of confident and not intimidated. If you want to stand in front of a room of 1,000 people, like play music and stuff, you've got to be able to be comfortable in your comfort of your own home, sitting in front of your phone and whatever. Because,
absolutely.
You know, so that's the first thing. It's like you have to accept the things that you can't change, right? And I think once you accept that and you accept that you've got to do it and don't fight it, it probably becomes a bit easier, right? That's always been my approach to life, is accept the things that you can't change, right? And then after that, it's just a matter of like your content strategy and your attitude, right? I've always had a platform where I've been open, transparent, like fun, bit silly, but always trying to also have something in there that's entertaining, informative, educational, sometimes a bit emotional. And those are the things, those are the levers that get people to engage with your content and take it beyond just watching a video. You know, a lot of people have done content where they're just like filming their record on the decks and stuff, and that will resonate to a small degree with people that like that music, but without adding something on top of that, you're never really going to build a community.
Absolutely.
So you've got to think about, there's consistency is a key thing, absolutely key thing, right? The attitude that you bring is going to resonate, whether it resonates positively or negatively. You've got to think about that. You know, if you're you've got to think about who the target is. If you're a DJ and you want to get into DJing and playing at events, you've got to make content that's going to appeal to the sort of people that are going to want to come to your event. Now, if you're into retro music and you like playing music from the 90s and whatever, then that's cool, but you're going to find that your content resonates with people that don't go out
anymore.
Much, right?
Absolutely,
and that's one example, right? So you've just got to think about that. The other thing is, and I hope that by telling this story, I've done this in sort of quite a deliberate way, but you know, I've pivoted my content strategy, adjusted it, and I've looked at what's working. I've analysed it. You could never, I don't think you could get to where I'm at now by coming up with a completely contrived plan at the beginning. It's trial and error, authenticity, trial and error. You know, it's all authentic, but you also look at things and go, that worked better than that. That's not
look
contrived.
at the patterns.
Yeah, it's not contrived to say this is working better than that, so I'm going to focus more on that. Or, you know, people don't like that, so I'm going to stop doing that. Or this is more interesting. Or, you know, whatever. Right? That's the thing. There's lots and lots of tips out there. Just as there is for music production, which has been useful to me, social media as well. There's some good creators and there's some rubbish ones that give tips on, you know, how to do good hooks on your content, or you know how to use your content in more than one place. You know, how you
and you're a
push it out
student
and
of all of those
stuff.
things.
So I was more trial and error myself, right? But my advice to other people that are struggling or they're getting into it, whatever, would be to try and look and hunt out for some of those creators, because you could probably shortcut a lot of the stuff that took me a year or two to learn by finding good creators that talk about that. Having a good hook at the start of the video is an obvious one, but there are also people will do a video going, here's 10 ideas for hooks at the start of the video. And it'll be like, I was amazed when I found out that this, or here's one tip, that, you know, these little things. And those are the things that will get people watching it beyond the first second or two of your video, right? If the vast majority of people, in my experience, music production is much harder than social media, right? But I think a lot of good music producers would probably disagree with me. But I have done both. I've been successful in one. And I just find social media like probably takes less time to get good at than music production.
I find that they probably don't find social media harder, but it just takes this kind of relentless focus on it. Not that music production doesn't, but like it's almost like a lot of the producers that I talk to will say it's like, well, I'm not passionate about social media. I'm passionate about making music, you know? And they kind of underestimate how important it is to do both, because one doesn't go without the other. But like what I'm gathering from you, which is what I love, and thank you so much for your insights on this, is that it's very deliberate and that you have analyzed what works, and, you know, you call it trial and error, but, you know, you very deliberately looked at, you know, the things that work, the things that don't, and you've tailored your strategy towards that. And, you know, the results and the rewards are amazing because now you're living your dream life. It's really refreshing to see that somebody that has just relentlessly shared music is reaping the rewards of that, and you get to share it to many, many more people now.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it means everything to me. I've kind of cut down and this is the other thing, right? You don't have to post 10 a day is like ridiculous, right? I don't know. It was just working at the time my account was growing, but now the optimum number's more like kind of 2 to 3, and any more than that, and I find my following number actually starts to drop as people get a bit sick of it. But if it wasn't for that, I'd still be doing like like 5 or 10 a day, because I really enjoyed posting in all of these different genres and stuff like that. But, you know, everyone will have a different cohort. Everyone will have a different personality or approach, and it's just a matter of finding what works and what resonates for your audience, but also being astute to the things that are working, and just narrowing your focus. Never be afraid to try stuff. One thing on social media is people love getting to know the person behind the content, you know, and it's because there's a lot of people out there that are sharing content of all sort of different types. But you know, someone like, if you look at Serum, for example, right? You know, the drum and bass guy from King of the Rollers, right? He doesn't put out anywhere near as much content as I do. I mean, he's got a much richer production background than me, and he's been intertwined in the scene for a long, long time, and just put out so many absolute bangers, right? And that helps, but it's still, you're always fighting to maintain your relevance in a rapidly churning audience of new people coming in and other people. Because what, you know, with like drum and bass especially, right? Once you get into your mid-20s, a lot of people just, you know, it's a hectic, like heavy scene, and it's, you know, people mellow a little bit and stuff like that. And then you've got people,
I can't hack it with the BPM anymore.
but it's like that. It's like that with a lot of things, right? But you're always getting young people coming in, so it's not good enough just to try and trade off your name. Well, it's not that it's not good enough, but it will eventually lead to your audience diminishing, right? If you just think that you can trade on your name, no matter how big you were, or how successful, or how well known and how loved you were, that you'll always get that natural attrition, whereby the people that are actively going out,
those that stop going out, I always say that like you can have 100k followers, after 10 years only 10% of those are going to be active. You know, and if you're not constantly turning over and adding new people, like we just summed it up, me and my friends, as like, if you're not growing, you're dying, basically.
No, but it is. It's either going up or going down, right? You know, with Serum, he's got some. He doesn't do like anywhere near as much content as me, but he's got stuff where he like does stuff with his cats and talks about biscuits and stuff like that, and it's actually very engaging. So I'd advise you, not everyone needs to do what I've done and set themselves up as a sort of like, you know, dance music educator, and you don't need to have a huge record collection or even like, you know, all of that, because our decades of buying records has given me you know, something to talk about and stuff. And I appreciate maybe not everyone's got that, especially younger people coming out. But if you look at Serum, he talks about, you know, about biscuits and about his cats and stuff, as well as playing all the new music he's producing, and it's very engaging, you know, and people like it. And he's one of those people that's like, you know, not an 18, 19, 20-year-old lad, you know, but he's still able to engage with that really young audience. I think, you know, another really good tip would be to, you know, look at the people who you think they're doing it really well. Don't just rip off their content, because people are like, you know, audiences are wise to that sort of thing, right? But look at it a little bit more like from the bigger picture, like not so much as in right, he's talking about biscuits and cats, so I'm going to talk about biscuits and cats. But you go, right, someone has brought a bit of their personality and some of their interests and some of their quirks to bear in what they're doing. What are my versions of that I could talk about, that I could do, that could be engaging or make me a little bit interesting or just give a point of difference? You know, people will say, oh, he's the guy that wears...
Modelling excellence, essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah.
I mean, look, this is all golden advice, and I think this is a perfect... perfect sort of bit of information to finish on. It's been super valuable. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. And I want to basically say to all of you guys that are watching, I always forget this, but please like and subscribe to the channel if you found what we talked about valuable. And yeah, that just leaves me with saying thank you very much, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I wish you all the best for the future. The future's bright. I can see it already. And you're going to have a hell of a summer ahead of you. So
I can't wait.
Yeah.
And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.